Nomiki Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen on the social platform's algorithm.
One of the most shocking pieces of information that I brought out of Facebook that I think is essential to this disclosure is political parties have been quoted in Facebook's own research saying, we know you changed how you pick out the content that goes in the home feed. And now if we don't publish angry, hateful, polarizing, divisive content, crickets. We don't get anything. And we don't like this. We even know our constituents don't like this. But if we don't do these stories, we don't get distributed. And so it used to be that we did very little of it. And now we have to do a lot of it because we have jobs to do. And if we don't get traffic and engagement, we'll lose our jobs.
One of the internal Facebook studies on the new algorithm concludes, quote, the current set of financial incentives our algorithms create does not appear to be aligned with our mission. What does that mean?
So Facebook's mission is to connect people all around the world. When you have a system that you know can be hacked with anger, right? It's easier to provoke people into anger. And publishers are saying, oh, if I do more angry, polarizing, divisive content, I get more money. Facebook has set up a system of incentives that is pulling people apart.
And yet it's profitable.
It's very profitable for content producers, and it's profitable for Facebook because people continue to engage.
When you're dealing with disinformation and misinformation, what are some of the things that you're seeing?
So Facebook has done experiments where they take brand new accounts. So Facebook has said before, you're complaining about the misinformation you're seeing. It takes two to tango, right? You know, you picked your friends, you picked the topics that you engage with. Don't just blame us, it's on you. So they've taken brand new accounts, so no friends. And all they've done is follow Donald Trump, Melania, Fox News, and like a local news source. And then all they did was click on the first 10 things that Facebook showed them. Or if Facebook suggested a group, they joined that group, right? So they're not doing any conscious action here. There's just one tangoing. And within a week, you see QAnon. Within 2 weeks, you see things about white genocide, right? And you can say, how did that happen? Why are these the things that Facebook is choosing to show you? And it's because those things get the highest engagement.
What is engagement-based ranking?
Facebook right now is trying to optimize for what it calls meaningful social interactions. And those are reacts, likes, comments, reshares. Every time when someone takes one of those actions, clicks through a link, that is engagement. And Facebook goes and looks at all the things that you've clicked on, and it makes a model of you. Facebook's own research says publishers know you are more likely to engage with angry content. There is a perfect reverse correlation where the angrier you are, the more traffic leaves Facebook and goes to your publishing site. And so I guarantee you publishers all around the world are looking at those visits from Facebook and saying, if we make more angry content, we'll get more distribution.
For Facebook.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. It is Wednesday, October 6th, and you just watched some of the seismic, and I say seismic, that's intentional, allegations being made by a whistleblower who worked on Facebook's internal operation to address some of their issues with bias and algorithmic issues and yada, yada. You heard what she had to say about democracy and how folks are, quoting me, radicalized. On the show, you know, we talk about this all the time, and sometimes it can be complicated because we challenge people who are choosing to profit off of the way that these algorithms function. how a video goes viral based on fighting and shouting and attacking and hate, and oftentimes that hate is directed at women. So why do we talk about these issues? I mean, we are one of the few shows that is hosted by women on the political left on YouTube, and I talk about that all the time, and we talk about it on Fridays, and we address that by having women on Fridays and talking about issues related to women in a more intersectional way. Why do we do that? We do it partly to make a point to an audience that is primarily male, because they're not necessarily seeing this in their feed. What most people, not just men, most people on Facebook, this is a different platform, are seeing is generated by this algorithm, which is incentivizing hate. It is people are more likely to interact with hate and anger and outrage and debate than they are with investigative series. And when Facebook chose to change their algorithm in a way that they thought was going to benefit the community by making it about community rather than information and viral videos, what they lost in that was some of these viral videos were coming from, they were information videos. Whether it was Now This telling you about a new piece of legislation that was dealing with pollution in your city or your community. Now it's about, my friend said this, let's get in debate on this, et cetera, et cetera. And these are my beliefs. And then suddenly, when you don't have fact checking, when you don't have institutions, when you don't have oversight, and when you don't have diversity of opinion, and it's built off of rage and engagement, which is often a response to rage, you're not having quality information. And then misinformation spreads, conspiracies thread, and communities are built and grown out of that spread that outrage and that hate. This is not new. This is not something that has been formed out of Facebook. This is the human condition. This is how fascism in the most organic forms spread. She talks about how political parties are angry that they have to share things by making it, masking an outrage because it's the only way their content gets spread. And by content, I mean, like, if you're the Democratic Party and you want to keep people engaged with the election, you have to make everything an outrage. So we got angry oftentimes because it was all about Trump's, stupid action that day rather than the content of his legislation. Part of that is because it was being incentivized. The only way for the Democratic Party or Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders to stay in the mix on Facebook was to address some sort of outrage from the other side, making it that sport, that blood sport. Do you remember that line? If it bleeds, it reads. Well, that's the line that used to be about the newspapers. If it bleeds, it reads. But newspapers also understood that with those stories, with the Kardashian stories, with the bleeds, it reads stories, those things paid for the newspapers back then so that the newspapers could do the quality work, the investigative work. Facebook is using this concept of keeping the community, the global community together, whatever that means, that gobbledygook, to escape their obligations as a platform that actually does spread information and news. And as a result, they do not want to take any responsibility. I think the reason why people are so scared of Facebook is because of the one-on-one personal communication. I trust the person in my community more than I trust the Democratic Party. But if the information my person in my community is getting or what they're feeling is very similar to what I'm feeling in my community because XYZ hasn't happened, and they're putting the blame on the Democrats rather than the Republicans in power, or vice versa, the Democrats and their community are putting the blame on progressives, that's how these ecosystems are solidified. Now, add to that, if your audience, let's take it over to YouTube now, if your audience is majority male because of a legacy of Gamergate that has grown this little slice of YouTube, this political slice of YouTube, and if the hosts that are getting the most engagement are male, and they're starting conversations that are dictating the political conversations and discourse on different platforms, that's very dangerous. So think about this. If my audience is 90% male, which it is, and I am a man on YouTube who puts themselves out as being, a leftist, and I want to make sure that our audience gets to 1 million subscribers in the next 2 months, I'm going to focus on the things that I know are going to get my audience riled up. And I'm going to find people in Washington that I'm angry about for not doing what I thought that they were going to do. And so they start getting riled up and engaged, and they start sharing my content. And then they go over to other platforms and they talk about what it is I'm saying in a good way or bad way, and maybe even echoing what I'm saying on those platforms. So now they're getting more clicks. Maybe they're even starting their own YouTube shows and echoing what I'm saying. And they're getting more clicks and getting monetized. And then the people who are watching are going on Facebook and Twitter and having those conversations with audiences that may not be primarily male. But it is coming from outrage and men. And I say men because the audience is 90% male. These tech companies know how to address it. They know how to show more transparency in the algorithm. They've been called out. Google has been called out for their bias, their racial bias, their gender bias, and they've done nothing. They know that they are building their algorithm and they're making more money off of hate and outrage. But at what cost? Mark Zuckerberg came out with a statement today saying, well, why is it, partisanship is occurring in the US, but it's not in other countries where Facebook is just as popular or even more so? Well, I'd like to know which countries he's talking about that. Are these countries where there are no parties? Seriously, are there many parties? What does partisanship look like in those countries? Do they have 20 parties? How does partisanship work when you have 20 parties and you have to build coalitions, every several months or every time there's elections? Or what does it look like in a country where there are no parties? Where there's essentially a dictator? Or maybe just one party, or maybe there's a minor party, but nobody really is part of it because, look at Turkey. I'm very curious. What does partisanship look like in Turkey where people do use Facebook? I'm very, very curious, Mark. That's a great excuse. And also, if that's the case, then why is it that fascism is on the rise globally? We have a responsibility in this society always, not just when we get called out, not just when regulators start to come in. But if your motive is solely profit and you know that what is profitable, and this is not a new concept, what is profitable is what bleeds. You could also do the responsible thing and make sure that even just shifting your algorithm a little bit so that there's more of a diversity of voices being put out there and and shifting the algorithm so there's a more diverse audience that's engaging with those voices. I have yet to do the makeup tutorials to make our videos go viral because that's just not who I am. And I think we can do better. Now, are there tricks that you can do to get information out there and break through the algorithm? Absolutely. Call me old-fashioned, but I feel like I shouldn't have to sell my soul because that's not what I personally like to do to make sure that this information gets out there. While other hosts that I know and came up with are able to to build their audience off of anger and hate and sitting in their boxers and going into the other room and just talking about whatever without doing any research. I think we have a duty here. I don't know what gets done, but I think that we have a duty here. And as we see with Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin right now, sometimes the smallest margins, the smallest decisions, smallest bit of regulation can make a huge difference when the stakes are this big. All right, we have a great show today. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Connor Towne O'Neill is a journalist and the producer of the podcast White Lies. His writing has appeared in New York Magazine, Vulture, Slate, and many other places. He also is the author of a book that is now out in paperback. Yay, my back, because I carry paperbacks when I'm traveling. That's how I get my reading done. No, but for real, this is a great book. It's called Down Along with That Devil's Bones, A Reckoning with Monuments, Memory, and the Legacy of White Supremacy, published by Workman Publishing. Connor Towne O'Neill, thank you for joining the Nomiki Show. Welcome.
Hey, Nomiki. Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
Nice to be with you too. So this is fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating, but it's also probably more common. This story or these types of stories are more common than we're aware of. And that's obviously an area you're working on. But monuments have become all the rage on the right and the left. And it's become many Fox News segments and fights, as you know. But it's really hit a nerve. And maybe it's because I, grew up in a community where there wasn't, as far as I know, wasn't one of these big monuments. I never really understood why there was so much pushback on taking down monuments of white supremacists, like Confederates, and also why there was so much attachment to keeping, challenging the legacies of some of our supposed heroes. So help me understand, like, what is this rooted in? Where is the anger on the right coming from? And how did you, go down this rabbit hole of learning about this one person in particular?
Yeah. So to your first question, which is, I think, really the crux of this, the argument that they try to make is that these statues are about history, and that you can't destroy our history. You can't erase our history. This is like good or bad. It is what it is. You can't. Why would you try and destroy it? But of course, monuments aren't history. History is in the archive. History is in the documents. History is, history lives on whether or not the statue comes down or not, right? Like, we're still reckoning with the legacy of Robert E. Lee or Nathan Bedford Forrest, even if some of their statues come down. So I think that's, it's pretty easy to see through that argument, but really that's just, I think that's the argument that's masquerading for something that has a lot more to do with prerogative and control and a sense of who this country is for, and who should benefit in this country. So, we have these when the Revolutionary War breaks out, George Washington's soldiers take down a statue of King George, right? When the Allied forces take Germany in World War II, Nazi symbols are removed. Even in 2003, American Marines are, sort of staged this removal of the statue of Saddam Hussein in Baghdad, right? So we know that losers don't get statues. So then why these, over 1,000 public symbols of the Confederacy if they lost the Civil War? And I think what's important to remember is that even if the Union had a military victory, the sort of ideological victory is much more questionable, because, of course, the South is saying to anyone who would listen in all of their documents, this is about slavery. And they're justifying that slavery on the belief that the men and women that they're enslaving are, by virtue of their race, inferior to them. In a sort of paternalistic way, or taking care of them. And that ideology is not by no means vanquished at Appomattox, and instead just takes other forms: convict leasing, the war on drugs, school segregation, Jim Crow, all of these other manifestations of it. And the statue's presence there lets us know this ideological victory isn't complete yet. So it purports to be about history, but it's about so much more as well.
When did the statue trend start? Meaning honoring Confederate leaders. I mean, forget about Christopher Columbus and other folks.
Yeah, so the Southern Poverty Law Center has done a lot of good data on this. The Monument Lab also has just released a study, and in each of them, it really reveals a trend. These are not statues that go up in 1866, 1867 in the immediate aftermath of the war. Instead, what you see are really two big influxes. The first has to do a lot with statues in particular, and that comes at the the turn of the 20th century. And so to sort of locate that in time, that's, after the collapse of Reconstruction, former Confederates are returning to power. They're implementing Jim Crow, and meanwhile are hoisting these statues to their heroes, or making heroes out of these, Confederate traitors. And that's the real first big influx of these statues. And so it's connected to, this moment that historians refer to as the nadir of race relations. Jim Crow, minstrelsy, very demeaning sort of Sambo imagery is just flooding, white America. Of course, it's the rise of racial terror lynchings as well. So it's just this really dark period that these monuments are coming out of. The second big kind of bumper crop is in the middle of the 20th century, and that's a lot more with place names. So roads, and particularly schools, which of course, again, is responding to its particular moment. Again, they're not really about history. They're always about the present too. So this is the moment of school integration. And schools, especially in the South, are being created, these so-called seg academies or segregation academies, where the white folks who can afford it are fleeing public schools as they integrate and going to private schools that then bear the names of white supremacists, slave owners, Confederates.
Unbelievable. Do you think that folks outside of the most extreme, racists and white supremacists were aware of it? White folks in particular? Was there a conversation about it, I guess is the better way of saying it, like an awareness, through the public?
I think in some cases, yes, but even when it doesn't, it just shows that it's just how that sense of prerogative, that sense of this is my history and it must be good, is so automatic that even when those conversations aren't happening explicitly, the sort of knee-jerk recourse to claim that kind of history, I think is just as telling. At the time though, when say a street was named Robert E. Lee Drive or street, the public, was there any sort of questioning of this from the community, from people that are not white supremacists but white? I thought that guy lost. Wait, it's 75 years later. Why is this our focus right now? There's certain in terms of Confederate symbols, there's certainly pushback from the Black community, there's certain pushback, but a lot of the public and official record of this stuff is hailing it sometimes in no uncertain terms about the racial motivations of it. So one of the statues that I write about in the book is this 30-foot bronze equestrian statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest that used to be in a park in downtown in the city. And when that statue goes up in 1905, a former senator gives a speech at the unveiling saying, Forrest's legacy will live on so long as there's a drop of Anglo-Saxon blood.
Oh my God.
The cartoon in the paper is an illustration of the statue, but the Forrest on horseback is wearing his Klan hood, and it says, Forrest rides again. So it's, it was explicit oftentimes.
Okay, so who was Forrest? Let's get to the crux of this.
Yeah,
how did you find him?
So who Forrest is? Forrest, he's born almost exactly 200 years ago. Some neo-Confederate folks that I met and interviewed along the way just celebrated his 200th birthday this summer. So that means that he's sort of coming of age as the Deep South, as we know it, is coming of age. So this is Trail of Tears, Indian Removal Acts, all of that land of the Deep South, Alabama, Mississippi, Western Tennessee, Louisiana, is being opened up to plantations. And this massive movement, what's called the Second Middle Passage of enslaved people from the Upper South, are coming down into the Deeper South, making millionaires. The Mississippi Valley has the highest amount of millionaires per capita when the war breaks out. And Forrest avails himself of that as well. He makes millions, by some counts, one of the richest men of the South, by operating a slave market in Memphis. Literally selling people down the river. Over 1,000 enslaved men and women are passing through his slave market every year in the lead up to the war. So he becomes incredibly rich, equips his own cavalry battalion when the war breaks out. And he has a sort of blue collar appeal to some people. He's unlike Lee. He didn't go to West Point. He hardly went to school at all. He's not illiterate, but he's not particularly eloquent. He has these sort of hard spun aphorisms. He's known as the untutored genius, and he becomes the historian Shelby Foote calls him one of the two geniuses to emerge from the war. The other being Lincoln. He becomes the most promoted soldier, North or South. But of course, to be heralded as a Confederate soldier is a pretty questionable task, right? And he's and that's certainly true for him. He's accused of committing war crimes. During the Civil War, he and his men slaughtered almost 200 surrendering Black troops at Fort Pillow, which is just north of Memphis. He's really attached to these moments of racial violence, slave trading, the Fort Pillow massacre. After the war, that trend continues. He becomes the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. He operates a convict leasing plantation just outside of Memphis, a practice known.
What is that? What is that?
Convict leasing. It's historians refer to it sort of as slavery by another name. So basically, if you were once these Jim Crow laws known as Black Codes are passed in the aftermath of the Civil War, they essentially criminalize Blackness. You could be arrested for not having a job, for being drunk, just for being Black. Essentially,
sounds like laws that still exist.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is the bedrock of mass incarceration, basically. Yeah. And you would be you would be incarcerated and then basically rented out to people to work agriculture jobs. Basically, it was a way of replacing the lost labor force after emancipation. And so he's bound up in all of these moments: slave trading, the massacre of Black soldiers, leading the Klan during Reconstruction, operating convict leasing system. I mean, he is so bound up in all of these manifestations of white supremacy. But he is. Again, he's not like Lee necessarily. He's not sort of front of mind when you think of Confederate generals. And I certainly, before I started this book, I didn't really know much about him beyond, a cheap joke in that Tom Hanks movie, Forrest Gump. Instead, I grew up in Pennsylvania, but I've been living in Alabama for almost a decade now. And when I moved to Alabama, there were all of these 50th anniversaries of the civil rights movement happening. And I kind of felt like I was being invited to try and make sense of Alabama through the lens of these anniversaries and through the lens of the movement. And so I'm in Selma on the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. That's the attack by Alabama police officers on nonviolent marchers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge there. John Lewis at the head of the line gets a fractured skull in the attack. And it really provides the kind of tailwind to pass the Voting Rights Act. So 50 years later, President Obama, the first Black president, is in town to mark the occasion. 40,000 other people show up, and I'm there. And parking is a nightmare. Selma's this little city, 40,000 extra people. It just sort of shuts down downtown. And so I'm looking around for a place to park, and I think, oh, I know, the cemetery, right? Selma's one of those cities with the classic Southern cemeteries. I pull in and immediately see these signs that say, Confederate Memorial Circle closed, no trespassing, which is just catnip for a reporter, right? Like, obviously you have to walk over there. So I walk over and just very credulously ask this group of people who are arms crossed, scowling at me, like, what are y'all doing here? And come to learn this group who calls themselves the Friends of Forest had spent the better part of the last 2 decades fighting about this statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest that they had put up. Now, given his biography, you would think putting up a statue of Forrest would be controversial anywhere. But to do it in Selma and how synonymous it is with the civil rights movement and with racial violence that took place there during the civil rights movement, you'd think it would, all the more offensive. But come to learn, they put up that statue on the very same week that Selma inaugurated its first Black mayor. So it was just extremely controversial. All of this fighting takes place. The statue's eventually stolen, but that only kicks off more fighting about whether or not they can replace it. A federal lawsuit breaks out that the Friends of Forest win. And when I meet them in 2015, they had just won in federal court. They were going to be able to put up another statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest. and were there that day to sort of thumb their nose at the event that was taking place, but to also get ready to put up this second statue of Forrest. And just the dissonance of that encounter, neo-Confederates on this major civil rights anniversary, raised all of these questions for me about who Forrest was, what it meant to put up a statue to him, what it meant to do so in 2015. And so those are some of the questions that then led me to this book.
So I'm curious, like, when they went to the courts, I mean, were they trying to put a statue on public property or on private property?
Well, that was one of the questions. The city owns the cemetery, but there was this question about whether or not the city had deeded this Confederate section of the cemetery to the United Daughters of the Confederacy, but there was no deed. So it was very unclear who could decide what would happen there. If the city council could decide it wasn't going to go up, but the UDC was saying, no, this is ours. And it's interesting, the woman who started the UDC chapter in Selma in the aftermath of the war is this woman named Elodie Todd Dawson, who was half sisters with Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife.
Whoa.
So they took very diverging paths, right? Like one, is the wife of the great emancipator, and the other is this fire-breathing secessionist.
Oh my God. Well, we all have that.
I know.
I mean, we all do.
Yeah.
I have a cousin who got married on Robert E. Lee Drive in Virginia, and I'm like, what?
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I had to show up to her wedding, and I just said, even the pastor, sorry, as a side note, even the priest, or I don't know, she's born again Christian, so whatever, the reverend, I guess, was like, this is an interesting place to have a wedding. Even he was like, I don't feel comfortable with this.
Yeah, it's intense, but again, it's just a testimony to it's all around us.
All around us. I mean, that was my big wake up call was going to that wedding. She lives in Virginia, and she's not. I don't know what her personal beliefs are, but she's outwardly not, political at all. But I think she was just like, this is an interesting location, having a wedding at a plantation. And I walked in with my father, and we were like, oh my God, I don't even know what to do with this. And there were memorabilia, there were photos on the wall of Confederate times and soldiers. And it was really a living monument to the Confederacy. And it was beautiful, the building, beautiful plantation, former plantation, but really just jarring and shocking to me. And especially because I live in New York, I was like, how is this possible? And of course, the fights over the memorials have emerged from that. But, if you are not around that, if you're not immersed in that, I don't think there's as you weren't aware of what was going on in Selma until you discovered it. It was obsessive in my mind. I mean, I walked away from that situation thinking, I don't even know if my cousin was aware of what was happening there, because I just don't think she's a politically, aware person. But I walked away like, these are people who are they're obsessed. It's not a club. It's not like some sort of, Civil War reenactment thing, which I think was going on in what I thought they were doing. These are people who are obsessed. And so that leads me to the next question, which is, this is a cultural. This is much bigger, I think, than KKK members in 2021, right? So where do the KKK members land on the spectrum, and where do the people who just who are part of keeping these monuments alive and, taking over plantations and having weddings, with photos on the wall, whatever they do in their obsessive minds, like where on the spectrum are these folks? Are those folks part of the KKK? Is the KKK bigger than we think or know? I mean, we learned so much about this just through police, in since the George Floyd murder. So many people realized the FBI, coming forward and saying there's organized white supremacy more than you're even aware of in police departments. And I think that was a big wake up call for folks. So how large is this, and where is it coming from?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it really spans the spectrum. I mean, there's certainly folks who are affiliated, if not with the Klan, then with violent white supremacist groups. A lot of the folks that I talked to were affiliated with a group called the League of the South. which is in no uncertain terms, and a white nationalist group responsible for instigating a lot of the violence in Charlottesville. The driving the car down the street, that guy wasn't in the League of the South, but all of those scenes of the fighting in the park before that led the governor to shut it down. A lot of that was instigated by this group, the League of the South, who sort of marched into the fray, in this kind of like wedge formation. So there are definitely folks who are affiliated with groups like that who are just, really hard-bitten white supremacists. There are other folks, though, who come to it, I think, more so in a way that is just a testament to how segregated our memory is, how segregated our sense of the past is. So the kinds of folks who think it's just kind of innocent to have a wedding at a plantation, right? It's just the way it is. It's beautiful, or my great granddaddy fought in the Civil War, and I want to honor him. Just it's these case studies in what Ta-Nehisi Coates calls the dream. White folks dreaming and having no sense of themselves as what's been done in our name in the past, how that has created the present that we live in and benefit from. It's just sort of this oblivion that they're in. The great historian W.J. Cash, whose book The Mind of the South is this great sort of psychological case study of white Southerners. He talks about it as a cloud cuckoo land, that it's just our sense of who we are and how we came to be, and what the price of that ticket was, is just totally lost on us. I think it has a lot to do with American exceptionalism, really. Yes. Like we think of ourselves the greatest country in the world, democracy, freedom, liberty. Yeah. And kind of take that to mean that our history must flatter us, that there can't be anything bad, or that might indict us, or might lead us to believe that maybe we've been the antagonists at moment, or we might be responsible for rectifying some of the things that we've done in our past and continue to do in our present. I mean, I think that's it, right? Like the folks pushing back against the 1619 Project from the New York Times. Are all of them in the Klan? No, but they do have this sense of prerogative that our history cannot indict us. Our history cannot lead us to support the kind of progressive interventionist policies that might seek to rectify some of these historical injuries, and instead say, no, that's communism. That's, right. That's propaganda, that's Marxism, whatever it is, that's bad history. You hate white people, that kind of thing. Is just, it comes from this sense of, I like the way things are have benefited me, and they benefit me because I deserve it, because I'm a white American.
And that's it. I think ultimately I'm thinking about my cousin who is not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. She's Greek. Her family did not have a story like so many of these. I mean, I don't even know if she knows her own history, to be honest, and what it took for her family members, my family members, to come over. With that being said, I think that there's the dream is so much part of this, but what comes to my mind is people don't want to face their privilege. They don't want to face the fact that they are in a position that was of privilege, that was built off the backs. Maybe they weren't personally responsible for it or even complicit in it, although I think right now there's a lot of complacency, but they are essentially in their position because it was built off the backs of slavery, injustice, slaughters, humanitarian issues, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's a range of those who just kind of want to tune it out. Mm-hmm. And those who think that American exceptionalism is, for whatever reason, just because we're bigger and better, not understanding that capitalism is racism, in my opinion. So, Connor, super fascinating. Unfortunately, we have to jump to our next interview, but would love to have you back on again. You have done really exceptional work here, and it's out in paperback now. So go check out Down Along with That Devil's Bones, A Reckoning with Monuments, Memory, and the Legacy of White Supremacy. And of course, Connor is a producer of the podcast White Lies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. It's been great.
We'll be right back to talk about Kyrsten Sinema. Kyrsten Sinema. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Oh, Senator Sinema, man. If she weren't so dangerous, she'd just be so cute. I think that's what she's going for. I'm just kidding. I'm excited that Andrew Perez is joining us today. He is a senior editor at the Daily Poster. He has a piece out in Jacobin right now about everyone's favorite senator, Kyrsten Sinema, and it's titled, Senators Need to Hear From Their Constituents. Oh, do they? I'm so curious. Do they care? Andrew, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so the thing about this whole situation, I don't think I need to share like what's been going on with Kyrsten Sinema. I mean, if you're on our show, I'm guessing that you've probably been paying attention to the news. But Senator Sinema, what really blows my mind is like the normal tools of democracy, shame. Sometimes shame works, sometimes it doesn't. Incentives, keeping somebody in office, all these sorts of things just don't seem to be working on her. And I say this because okay, so she's being shamed a lot right now. She's being followed around, as is Joe Manchin, on planes and bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera. Her office is being swarmed with calls. Normie Democrats are like blasting her now on, CNN's even like, come on, lady. Joe Biden is not really having it, which says a lot because he's not somebody to really pick fights with people. And, different than Manchin, she could very well lose her general election. I'm not even talking about her, being primaried from the left. And if it were just about money, I would be like, you don't need to go through all this. If you want to make a lot of money after the Senate, like that just happens. You could be a congressman for one term or a woman for one term and make a lot of money. So it just seems like the incentive structure is not, it's like she's like on a different level or in a different, I don't know what's going on in her mind. So the premise of this piece being, that they need to listen to their constituents, that sounds very normal. But it doesn't seem to be working for her. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. I guess it's kind of hard to speculate here. I do think that money has to be a pretty big motivator here. Only because, she has been, like kind of a run-of-the-mill Democrat on a lot of issues, or at least like backed the party on, sort of its overall platform. And like in 2018, she ran on she sold herself as an independent, but she still supported the bulk of the Democratic platform. I think there's some thought that she's, trying to like carve out this like John McCain like, image. But, I think when you look at the stuff that, she's not making any public pronouncements here, but at all, like not talking to activists, not talking to reporters. But if you like read through the lines of the stories that are talking about what her interests are in the reconciliation bill, like what her problems are with the bill, every single time it's like this, it's an issue that threatens, big industry or very wealthy people. The pharmaceutical, Democrats' drug pricing measure is obviously a big example, which would allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices and significantly lower drug prices for everyone. And she has sort of reversed positions on this. Like she ran some ads talking about wanting to lower drug prices in her 2018 campaign during the primary. She's now parceling out these little baby scoops to Beltway news outlets, where, they're citing, two or three sources familiar with the senator's thinking. It's because if you were to like tell people, oh, I don't think that Medicare should negotiate drug prices, they would say like, are you okay? What's wrong with you? Why did you lie to us? They're deeply unpopular positions. She also is opposed to like any new tax hikes. That is the most popular part of the Democratic agenda, right? Is the idea of increasing taxes on the wealthy. Like those are the two most popular provisions in this reconciliation bill, are punishing wealthy people who have been ripping everyone off, and paying a significantly lower tax rate than anyone else, and recouping some of the money from big pharma that people have to pay them every year. So you found this
this audio, and it's really interesting because this is an audio from when she was in the Green Party. This isn't, audio from when she was running for Congress to the left of some other fairly left Democrats in her first primary. This is an audio from 2 years ago, it's from 6 months ago. And what does the audio say? And by the way, there's audio from this time period that was already leaked out before. So can you remind folks what this event was and what was being said there?
Yeah. So, we crashed an event held by the National Restaurant Association in April. They invited both Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin there to speak right after they played a prominent role in, killing the $15 minimum wage provision in Democrats' COVID relief bill. And they had Sinema on by phone, and she was, asked by their chief lobbyist, who I'm going to say his wife literally raises money for Kyrsten Sinema's campaigns. On
the staff or just as a bundler?
A fundraising firm.
Okay.
Yeah, she helps lead a fundraising firm that works for Sinema.
What is it called? Let's just throw it out there so people know.
Fulkerson Kennedy,
Got
I
it.
believe. So they had her on and are asking her, what advice would you give to, our restaurant owners, members, as they go lobby Capitol Hill, today and this week? It was information session for people who are about to go become citizen lobbyists for the restaurant industry.
So there's there's citizen lobbyists for the restaurant industry. What kind of constituency they have? Come on.
Yeah, it's restaurant owners. It's restaurant owners, operators, executives. She was asked to give advice to them, and she said that it was really important that senators hear from their constituents, that, hearing from constituents early and often makes a huge difference. She was talking about how it's always important to have that meeting, to share your position on an issue and to explain why you have that position. But, here we are 6 months later, no one can get a meeting with her unless you're
really
a lobbyist, a lobbyist or a donor. No one, her constituents can't get meetings. It's why they are trailing her around, Capitol Hill they're actually going into, her class in Arizona, following her into the bathroom, trying to talk to her on airplanes, trying to talk to her on the way out of the airport. It's because, these are people from groups that actually rallied votes for her in 2018.
Knocked on doors for her. A lot of, members who've been fighting the SB 1070 laws, the laws targeting undocumented people in Arizona, of course. Is there a sense of what's happening with fellow lawmakers, whether it's fellow senators or Arizona lawmakers? I mean, I'm very curious how someone like a Raul Grijalva, from Arizona, who's very progressive in, southern Tucson, how he's interacting, especially since he has this base of Latinos in particular in his district that knocked on doors for Sinema and helped Biden and Sinema win this last election. It was very much part of the win.
Yeah. Honestly, we reached out maybe a week or two ago to all of the Arizona's Congress people to see if they had a comment on how she is, looking to blow up this legislation. And we did not hear, just total crickets. But, it does seem like lawmakers are starting to get a little annoyed with her. It does seem that way. I mean, it keeps being framed as she won't even tell us what she's, opposed to. It won't even tell us what she wants. But that's not entirely true, right? She is telling Beltway papers exactly what she wants. And it's, no penalties for big pharma, not so interested in, expanding Medicare to include dental, vision and hearing.
I'm sure the seniors in Arizona really love that one.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's top of their priority list is not having those items be included in Medicare.
Well, sorry, just on that note, because I want to get into the gray areas of this. Are there industries that are fighting back? Industries that you wouldn't normally think, for instance, an association of, I'm not sure, nursing. I mean, they're not tied into Medicare, but they represent people who need the money to pay for private nursing homes And it just seems like there would be a strategy from other industries to kind of go after these ones that are affecting their bottom lines.
Yeah. I mean, you hear like hospital lobbying groups and insurance lobbying groups complain about big pharma, but like at the end of the day, they are all in this together.
Yeah.
The for-profit healthcare industry is united together in this scam, right? Where they get to keep bleeding Americans dry. Because if you started taking money from pharma, where does it stop, right? Like then you might, tell insurance companies that they have to cover people's medical procedures. You might, that their 20% administrative overhead that's been written into, legislation is actually not appropriate. So yeah, they all are in this together, and hospitals obviously are like some of the biggest drivers of healthcare costs as well, because they just charge tons of money.
Okay. Aside from official comment, are there any sort of like whispers that you're hearing, or people who've gone on background from, Capitol Hill, any of these offices in Arizona about her behavior? And I mean, like you said, they're growing frustrated, but is anybody officially saying she's doing this because of this one industry, or she has these goals? I think we're just all trying to get into the psyche of why. Is it worth this? You're probably not going to get reelected. Like I said, you're not getting reelected. You could do this or not do this, and you'll still get a job with wherever you want to go. I mean, what do you want to like, is Elon Musk offering you a place on the moon? Like, I don't know. What is that for?
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely trying to hear from some of these people. Haven't really heard anything good yet, but we'd love to hear more. Anyone who has a tip about Kyrsten Sinema, please, hit us up.
Yeah.
Same with Joe Manchin, same with any of these lawmakers. We want to cover what's actually happening here.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of Joe Manchin and Sinema's interactions together, what is are they doing this as a team? Obviously, they have different negotiating tactics, but and things that they're putting on the table or just not putting on the table. But what does it seem like, they're conspiring on together? Like, how are they coordinated?
I mean, they're both, talking about the Medicare provisions, the expansion of Medicare. They're both sort of shooting that down a little. But, I think the truth is there is power in two of them blocking legislation. It would be a little more difficult for one of them to be, just one senator, being the, main roadblock to, what is Joe Biden's bill, right? This is honestly, it's the Joe Biden agenda bill. It's not, Bernie's helping get it through, but it's not, the Democratic platform being written into a bill. All these lawmakers supported it. So it's a lot harder for, just one person to block it. There is some strength in having two of them.
Just to go back, when did this turn start? We all hear about the glory days of Kyrsten Sinema protesting Joe Lieberman and being part of the Green Party. And then, I'm background here. I went to school in Arizona. I have family in Arizona. So, I even remember knowing her in 2006 and seeing a very different Kyrsten Sinema then when she was in the legislature. So when did this turn happen? So before she's in the Senate, after? Did she start taking certain money? Like, I'm just fascinated because I feel like this is also, we as progressives need to be aware of how this happens so that we can prevent it in the future.
Yeah. I mean, it started when she was in the House, definitely. She's sort of allied with like the payday lending industry in the House. She took a lot of money from them. She was like one of the kind of conservative Democrats who would, take shots at like some like Dodd-Frank, Wall Street reform, policies that as they were being implemented. But those are things you can do like kind of quietly, right? Like no one really has any kind of, the broader public is not intimately familiar with like the provisions in Dodd-Frank. It's, she never was playing like a central role in trying to spike party priorities. At the same time, Democrats were not really, fully they didn't have full control of government at that time like they do now, right? Like this is a limited time that Democrats have where they have the presidency, the Senate, and Congress, even if it's, very limited control, right? If they have very small margins. They have no margins really in the Senate at all. Yeah. But it is also the time when you could get your agenda enacted. That time is limited, right? Like the truth is, it could end any day. If any Democratic senator dies, it could end tomorrow. Yeah. And they only have a very small margin in the House too. So it's, she is now holding up the party's priorities at the only time that, we might see where they have the power to enact an agenda and get it passed into law.
Who is the biggest industry that's backing her?
Well, so there have been a bunch of ads in Arizona being run by this group called Center Forward. Last time we checked, they'd spent like $600,000. And it is a group that is literally led by like lobbyists, including lobbyists for big pharma, like pharma, the powerful lobbying group. And they've also received substantial funding from pharma. They'd received like 25% of their money, $4.5 million from pharma between 2016 and 2019. And we just don't have more recent tax returns. They haven't had to file them yet. So yeah, it's a pharma front group. They're running all these ads right now talking about how Kyrsten Sinema is independent and also, a great hero for trying to pass this infrastructure legislation, the roads and bridges pieces that we've been talking about so much.
It's fascinating. Are they pouring money into any others? I mean, I look at like Arizona and I compare it to New Jersey, which is, pharma heaven. And I know Cory Booker said that he was no longer going to take pharmaceutical money. Are there others? I mean, I understand the power of putting pharma money into a vote, a person who is able to change, legislative future, even if their state isn't like a big pharma state. But are there others like that?
Yeah, well, so there were a handful of Democrats. There were, there were 4 Democrats who have voted down the party's drug pricing legislation in committees over the past, I guess a few weeks ago. And I can tell you who they are. It's Scott Peters from California, Kurt Schrader from Oregon, Kathleen Rice from New York, Stephanie Murphy in Florida. There are 2 more, all of those lawmakers have now signed on to this kind of alternative drug pricing bill that is just phenomenally weaker than what's being discussed here. Josh Gottheimer has signed on to that from New Jersey. Lou Correa has signed on to it as well from California. And Center Forward coincidentally started running digital ads backing all of these 6 lawmakers just, a few weeks ago. Just only them, no one else. They're not spending on anyone other than those 6 lawmakers and Sinema.
Ladies and gentlemen, the people responsible for and contributing to the demise of humankind. I'm not even going to say the Republic. It's like, I want to start running ads. I wish Sunrise, could run ads and be like, hope your drug, prices were worth it, pharma, because you're also, contributing to climate change. You're contributing to so many other things. That's the messaging. It's like, it might be about this one thing for you guys, but it's really about something much bigger. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, for giving us the breakdown, answering some of these questions. This has more just been like, I'm curious who's going to know the stuff that I've been wondering about Kyrsten Sinema, because there's so much coverage of her, but I just want to know at the end of the day, who's giving her the money? When did she turn? Why did she turn? What is this really all about? The human side of her, because at the end of the day, the senators are human. They have egos. And if they're, it doesn't seem like Biden's really getting his way with her. So everyone else has got to work on it. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I love it. Sunset Lake CBD. Sunset Lake CBD is pretty much, it's the only CBD that I've ever used and loved and seemed like it worked. I remember when the trend started, I was like, what is CBD? Everybody's talking about it. And I tried it. I tried it from a bodega. I spent like $100 on a tincture and it tasted horrible. And then I was like, I don't know what this does. This isn't calming me down. It's supposed to help with stress and pains and aches. None of it worked. And so I just gave up on it. And then I was scolded by Sam Cedar. He was like, no, this stuff works. I use it all the time. It helps me go to sleep. And that was the music to my ears, helps me go to sleep. So of course I tried Sunset Lake CBD, and it did help me sleep. It helped me go to sleep. It helped me stay asleep, which is a big deal. I toss and turn because of my aches and pains. I have sciatica. Because I can't stay asleep, I have this like sleep monitor, as you guys know, to track it. And the days that I don't take Sunset Lake CBD, I don't do the tincture, I see that I wake up. And many times I'll wake up in the middle of the night and drink some tincture because I forgot to earlier. Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm in Vermont to your door. They have all types of products. They offer tinctures, gummies, fudge, salves, coffee, lotions, all designed to help with your stress, your aches, and your pains, and your sleep. It is like, I don't know how they make their product. I guess it just shows you when you create a pure product, it's good. But what else would you expect? They actually flipped a farm in Vermont, a Ben & Jerry's farm, that's really good juju, and decided to diversify and grow premium hemp there. So not only is the product great, the company is great. They're contributing to sustainable agriculture in a rural community. When you work with them, when you support them, you're actually supporting rural economies and creating meaningful employment in the community. The majority of the company is owned by their employees. Their minimum wage, hello, Kyrsten Sinema, is $15 an hour. And on top of all that, they support independent media like our show, The Nomiki Show, The Majority Report, and The David Pakman Show. There's all sorts of new products out there right now. They've got the dog biscuits that have 3 simple ingredients: peanut butter, pumpkin, oat flour. And now they have a new tincture. This is a big deal. It's a tincture that has 1,200 milligrams of CBD oil infused with 90 milligrams of melatonin. So not only does it help you stay asleep with the CBD, but it helps you go to sleep with the melatonin. I am going to be using this product this weekend because next week I'm going to Scotland, or this weekend I'm going to Scotland to cover the climate summit. And I immediately go into work. So I'm going to have to deal with the time zone differences very, very quickly. So I'm looking forward to trying it out. I haven't tried the melatonin version yet. All right. But if you want to go and order some products, you get 20% off. If you type in NOMI, N-O-M-I, at sunsetlakecbd.com, you get 20% off of your entire order. Type in NOMI, N-O-M-I, at sunsetlakecbd.com. All right. We will be back with our amazing panel. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. We have our favorite panel. No, I mean, all of the panels are great, but I do love these two because I've known them longer than the Nomiki Show. We have Arun Chaudhary, who is in an undisclosed location, an undisclosed kitchen somewhere in Eastern Europe doing undisclosed things, as usual, with a microphone that matches mine. And of course, Rabb, who is in a very disclosed location. Look at that. That's not a...
Yeah, man.
So beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. Made to last.
In Europe, they go to churches. We have some pretty amazing legislatures and government buildings in our country. I got to say that. Rep. Rabb is representing the 200th district of Pennsylvania, the Northwest Philly, very progressive district, and looking sharp today. I just want to go right into it because I know we don't have a lot of time with Rep. Rabb. He's in session and he might be pulled out. So I could not be more excited. Did I inspire this legislation because I don't shut up about it, Rep. Rabb? I'm just curious.
You can always, your fingerprints are on everything.
Is it? Okay. All right. So what is this legislation? Because I'm not trying to take credit at all, but I'm really excited about it.
Credit can be shared generously, but simply put, it's a very reasonable piece of legislation that would mandate vasectomies for all cis men within 6 weeks of turning 40 or within 6 weeks of siring their third child, whichever comes first. Additionally, we would have a $10,000 reward for anyone who can successfully report
it's important.
any of those inseminators who are non-compliant. Now, if they're non-compliant, they have to pay a hefty fee. And because I believe in equity, we can have a sliding scale so that, the really wealthy men can pay as a proportion of their household income. But really the point here is that we need to regulate what men are doing with their bodies. We don't want them to do anything irresponsible. We just want to make sure that the state is stewarding their decisions in a way that is in line with our priorities here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
And values.
Yes. And values. Yes, sir. That is absolutely right, Arun, because, we want people's decisions about their families, about their reproductive choices to be in line with what their elected officials deem reasonable. So, that's all it is.
Listen, Rabb, we government is just a reflection of the community. We are a community. And if we want to have a community that is responsible and cares about its people and cares about its babies, we need to make sure that the families are prepared to have and raise children. And we can't just have men out there going after women, whether they're married or not, or have kids or not. Although you said three kids. Listen, I'd like to lobby you to lower that age.
Totally.
And how many? How do you know? How do you know if a man has had 3 kids? Sometimes a man doesn't know how many kids they have had.
We're going to have, we'll probably be issuing vasectomy ID cards.
Sorry.
So that's what, see, this is why I love coming on the show, because
the white pass.
You spawn so much, creativity to influence, this is a seminal moment, right? And we have to really grab this issue by the scruff of its neck. And
you two are too much.
Move forward in good faith about a very important issue. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Run.
I'm going to break character for a second and just say I love this tactic generally because, it is, people often say, you sit there and you say, when you're explaining, you're losing. When you're explaining, you're losing. What do you mean? And this is what I mean, right? You're not explaining, you're just demonstrating. And I think, this is a really good example of that as a tactic. The Church of Satan, I think, famously also is sort of a quick one to just sort of show by doing. And I think just it's a really, really cool effort. And I hope it's replicated other places. How are your colleagues reacting?
So women are generally ecstatic who are pro-choice. The women who are anti-choice believe I am the spawn of Satan. I've never gotten as many death threats against me, my family, my staff.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to make this is a joke, but welcome to being a woman. Now people get.
Well, look, listen, as a Black progressive elected from Philly, this is the norm. And this month is when I normally get the most anyway, because I introduce and reintroduce my bill to abolish Columbus Day. I just issued a public memo announcing my bill to officially replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Working with Indigenous groups across the state. And the other thing I want to mention, because I got to jump back on the floor, is a couple days ago I circulated a memo on a forthcoming bill that requires transparency and accountability of police organizations, namely Fraternal Order of Police across Pennsylvania, where they have to provide information about their major expenses, their contributions, the demography of their membership in comparison to the communities that they're supposed to protect and serve, air quotes, and what type of counseling they're going to provide and guidance for those folks who have misconduct on their records. I've been pretty busy the past few days.
You got to let us know that's a great segue into our next topic, which we're going to get to after you join us. But please let us know what happens. What is the name of the vasectomy bill? And again, how do I lobby? I would like to lobby certain parts of it. I feel like you're being a little loose. It's just it's a little incrementalist in my opinion.
I've been using the hashtag SnipSip with the scissors icon. So it doesn't have a name like my progressive colleague in Illinois, Kelly Cassidy, who introduced the Texas Act. By the way, she is the sister-in-law of Newt Gingrich, who literally just last night blasted me on Twitter. So it's all just...
It's almost like they're all connected and they all have conversations to each other and they all take the same money from the Heritage Foundation and the Koch brothers and, who knows what KKK offspring. Yes. Well, Rep. Rabb, I'm excited. How can people support you? Can they sign petitions? Are you going to have a rally? Are there any men's rights groups involved? Because I feel like this is actually a great way for a man to just truly not be, if nothing is more empowering to a man than knowing that they can just have sex and have no consequences and not have to pay for the consequences. To me, that just seems like freedom. Freedom.
Well, as someone who got a vasectomy 13 years ago, I've never had to talk about this on the House floor because they're not legislating my bodily autonomy. But I've used this moment as someone who believes in reproductive justice, as a father, as a cis man, and as someone who's elected to exercise my reproductive rights by getting a vasectomy, to raise awareness about the gender double standard that exists in this state, in this country, because this would not get any news if I did another anti-woman bill, because that's the norm. But once you get anywhere near the gonads of a dude, it's World War III.
Love it. Arun, do you have any final questions?
No, as a human with a vasectomy, also,
oh wow,
who didn't wait until 3. I actually think this is going to have some nice conversations, so people will be like, both folks on the panel had vasectomies. They seem okay. Like it's a very reasonable thing, gentlemen. I think you should all think about it.
I was in and out in 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. It's absolutely not a big deal.
Yeah. So we need to lower the snowflake subset.
That's what I'm saying.
Of cisgender men and just go do it. Do it. Yeah.
And it's reversible too, right?
And it is reversible. Probably not for as long as I've had mine, but yes, for most people it can be reversible. But by the way, I want to mention some of my pro-birth adversaries were saying, what about reversal? I'm like, if they get a notarized letter from their spouse along with the appropriate, panel of politicians, they can choose to apply to get a reversal of their vasectomy. So I want to know that their
process
concerns are of, paramount to me.
Are you listening? You need to be on John Oliver. You need to get on Jon Stewart's new show. There needs to be a massive campaign. Like I said, 2028, I'm running for president on forced vasectomies. That is it. Hashtag. And by the way, that's incremental. I think that we are going to solve so many issues beyond vasectomies when we go a little bit further. But that has to do with, testosterone and what leads to having, when you have a bunch of men in a legislature with a lot of testosterone, like what kind of legislation does that, creativity, are you guys working together? Are you fighting with each other? I'm anti-testosterone. I'm not going to lie. All right. I'm not going there because every time I start talking about this, I lose like 100 subscribers, guys. just so you know.
Yeah, you'll be surprised.
So I guess who's on YouTube, dudes?
You will not be surprised how many nominally pro-choice men are very, their awkward responses or silence to this satirical legislation. And that's
satirical.
But that's kind of the point. If even so-called allies are silent or awkwardly, that means that these are conversations we have to have in the public domain.
Yeah, that's
agreed. Right. Rabb, get back to business. Thank you for all you do. Beautiful legislature. So many bad legislators.
Very nice. Yeah.
Very pretty.
Right. So long, folks.
All right. Take care.
Back when you could kill people to make buildings, they're nice.
They still do that in some parts of the country.
And most of the UAE, I think, every day. But, they're allies.
Oh, without a doubt. Those stories,
They're allies.
man.
They're allies.
Oh, my gosh. That's a whole other topic we should talk about at some point, because I feel like it's not discussed enough in the U.S. And when you go abroad, it's in papers every day about.
No, and they're still having. And now I am going to be the one who's confusing different places, or whatever. But like when they construct these stadiums and things for like the World Cup and stuff, it's these, these crazy air conditioned stadiums they shouldn't make anywhere. It's actually also labor issues that are so akin to slavery that to even start parsing it out is being a bit ridiculous, like actual modern slavery.
I don't want to bury the lead now. I mean, obviously we can talk about this more at length, in the future, but just describe like where for the UAE in particular, like they're basically bringing in.
Oh, South Asian. So a lot of folks from India and Pakistan. And these are folks who are like brought to work and then put back in like a windowless box, and literally are sometimes working in incredibly hot conditions, like all day, like deadly conditions, like something that traditionally no one who lives in the Middle East would do, because why would you go outside during a day when it's blisteringly hot? The answer is because you have some insane job where they like take your passport, they take your documentation. I mean, this stuff is.
And they're promised like, oh, you're going to have great economic opportunities. And they show up and they're like, wait, I have a box where I'm living with 30 other men. I might have a cot. I may not. I might have a sleeping bag. And
no freedom of movement, just brought to work and from work. And that's it. The box to the box, back to the box.
Language barriers. Yeah, this is pretty scary. All right. I want to shift gears because Rep. Rabb did bring something up, and you brought it up too. The police unions have tremendous power in this country. Notably, there's a long history of the corruption of the police unions I say quote corruption and racism of the police unions in Philadelphia, very, very famously so. And then in New York. New York City, just to remind folks, the Benevolence Association in New York, they actually doxed Mayor de Blasio's daughter during the height of the George Floyd. And this is a mayor who has literally never done anything. He's so afraid of the police unions. And now we understand why. Just in the last 48 hours, the FBI has raided an NYPD union, and the president of that union has resigned. Let's play this clip, and I want to get your response, Arun.
Absolutely. Them's a lot of papers. That's a lot of paperwork.
This is the Sergeants Benevolent Association, and Ed Mullins is the former union president. He stepped down this morning.
Poor
shocking,
Washington.
Lives in Long Island.
Yeah.
So I think what's really interesting about this is love cop on cop action, real fun. Always cool when they go after each other. No, but for real. What is this indicative of? I mean, it's one thing to have organized white supremacy, which the FBI has been investigating. We're not sure what's been going on here, but he stepped down.
Yeah, I mean, I think for one of these things to actually happen, I think it's less sort of, there's a mood in the country and so accountability and the police unions. I think it's less that, and something so specific has happened that is sort of very obviously egregious that these mechanisms have actually kicked into motion. Because if there's anything that, this last 6 months since the George Floyd, maybe it's been, actually a year since these, big protests all over the world in support of police reform, that has not happened. There has been sort of an absolute legislative failure to move on this. And so I don't think it's political pressure to make these things happen. I think there's something specific here that has happened that is enough to warrant these rusty mechanisms that don't want to have to do the thing to do the thing.
It's interesting because, when the George Floyd protests started the movement really, took hold and took shape. Learning that the FBI, I mean, we were aware because we've been reporting on this for a while, but learning the FBI had been investigating white supremacy in many of these police departments across the country. And that's just important to note that this is the union, not the police department. So the FBI has been investigating different police departments around the country for organized white supremacy. An organization in legal term literally means like there's entities, there's money flowing. It's not just like a group of people who like meet and have conversations about other white supremacists. This is actual like structural stuff here. But I think what's interesting is about this is maybe what it does is it leads to tips. And so even though the movements are separate from these actual investigations, the movements may empower people within institutions that know that there's stuff happening to tip off the FBI on certain things. And I think that's, where this kind of change can possibly happen. But the FBI is not perfect. The FBI today
clearly not.
Is, it's not, to be fair, the FBI is not the same FBI of 50 years ago when they were just, shooting up
gunning
activists.
Down people. Yeah,
exactly. And speaking of unions, but I'm like, well, how do you feel like these entities? Do you know enough about how the FBI kind of looks into these sorts of bad actors? Is there some sort of, are they really culturally different? Like, are there white supremacists in the FBI? I know it sounds silly, but look, we don't know these things. This is like
there's definitely like white supremacists in every branch of law enforcement to whatever degree. I think it's less the sort of more federal you get, and sort of more shocking, the more sort of down to the local beats you get. But what I do think is sort of useful in this happening, right? Even, however whistleblowers, if that's the impulse here, feel more empowered. However anyone does, yes, the system matters, but also these individuals matter, right? These are super families, like bordering on mafia stuff. These these police unions, right? They have very little resemblance to a labor union. I just want to make sure, I know your audience knows that, but let's just step back again, right? This is not exactly like a labor union. It's more like a protection racket, right. Shut up, you haven't done anything wrong, just sit there, we'll come take care of you, kind of thing. And so I do think one of the things, I know I dropped into some sort of accent for a second there. That was my cop accent.
Well, are you from Long Island or from West?
I'm from Westchester, but when I saw Port Washington,
okay,
I immediately, saw like. So I do think that there is like a few of these people, a finite number of these people who should be knocked out of these positions because they're steeped in this culture of sort of, it's not even, it is white supremacy, but it's like Bircherism, right? It's this sort of weird, old school, East Coast sort of Nixonian version of what it is to be a jerk. That's very specific, right? And sort of strange. But this is what fuels at it. And it will, and while sort of bad things will be replicated in the police department because there are systemic problems, it will be a bit better because some of these folks have accumulated an enormous amount of institutional power and are just at the nerve center of so many different weird things that when you connect them together add up to more trouble than they are on their own, which is, right, a culture of silence around the police, which is a culture of camaraderie in the police, which, around racism and all of these things.
That's really interesting. And it's why like cutting off the head of the snake is so important, because it's not that there isn't going to be white supremacy or bad actions and bad behaviors.
Yeah, new things will pop up, but they will not be as entrenched.
That's right. It's like, okay, Governor Cuomo stepped down. There are plenty of other neoliberals, but there's nobody's Governor Cuomo. Governor Cuomo had
but
a
nobody who
way.
could make up an organization overnight just to tank like a working class candidate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He does. He's a master of this. All right, let's shift gears, because part of the show we talked about Facebook and the power of Facebook, and I talked about on the show, just to give you background. It's not just Facebook; it's all of these platforms, and we definitely hone in on Facebook because of the election of Donald Trump, and it's very evil, and I'm not discounting that, especially since
Zuckerberg, he's just bad, and so he's just way more hateable. Jack somehow hipsters his way through things a little better. Nobody likes Zuck.
Nobody likes Zuck, and Google's just too mega for us to understand even how it works anymore. But these platforms are dangerous in that they really don't have any accountability whatsoever. It's crazy to me that after At this point, when did I sign up for Facebook? 2004. I was in college. I was a sophomore in college. Yeah, I mean, this is
Pretty
almost
early.
a 20-year-old. Yeah, this is almost a 20, and this is like, 6 months after it was hot or not, or whatever the hell it was, where it was like judging women.
Yeah.
But it was, we're almost 20 years into this project, and 30 with Google, and 15 with Twitter, and 9 with Instagram. And yet we are still having these conversations about like how to hold them accountable. And our government officials like literally don't even know what they're saying when they're asking these questions. So
I mean, and I'm sympathetic to all of it, but I think when I'm on, a show like yours or on the news and they're like, shouldn't this be like more regulated or shut down to figure out what's going on, to steal a phrase from Donald Trump, and like, they are too big to fail in this really important organizing way, and I think, for instance, it was election day yesterday when Facebook, WhatsApp, and everything went down in Italy, which was okay because it went down just as polls were closing. And so all of the kind of WhatsApp organizing had already happened over the last 2 days. But
wait. Let me put a pin in this real quick. For folks who don't know, WhatsApp is a tool that is used internationally, way more in the US. Like, pick a country, they're on WhatsApp. I had to reinstall WhatsApp when I was in Europe.
Yeah, it's a messenger service, but that is ubiquitous, not just outside the U.S., but also in immigrant communities in the U.S.
Exactly.
We had an excellent WhatsApp strategy in Houston to turn out a lot of, especially folks from Asia. But, so it's not just sort of digital advertising, but it is that also. These are the tools that we use to organize, and they have been around, as you say, so long that Google has replaced, the encyclopedia. You don't buy an encyclopedia. Facebook has replaced the classifieds in the public square and the place that you would go to actually make yourself heard and talk to your relatives and talk to all kinds of folks. And so we can't just sort of sideline these things and say they can't happen in elections and these people are bad actors. We actually have to actively also be like, well, what are the real services being rendered here? It's not just selling your data. There's something useful happening there. And can that be replicated in a different way? Should internet providers be required the way they are required to do C-SPAN? These are like our airwaves. We want to be educated as well as entertained. If you want to use our digital airwaves, should you have to provide a classified service everywhere that you provide the internet? Should that be something that comes with your internet service? I think yes. Should that automatically come with a way to digitally enroll to vote? Like, all of a sudden, there's all kinds of things you could do. It could be inside the post office if that is still around. I have been gone for a year from the U.S., so maybe you don't have a post office anymore. I hope. But there is this tension in between, like, the horrors that we see behind the scenes at Facebook every day, but also the utility of this. Without this, there's like no Bernie Sanders, right? Like, just to put it in a really blunt way, you cannot organize your way to winning these difficult elections to win.
Well,
without online organizing.
No, I think you're right, but it also is not, and this is kind of what I touched on at the beginning. It's not the same utility that it was when Bernie Sanders snuck through and won. It is. And you know this because you work in elections, but it is fundamentally much more difficult now to break through, partly because obviously there are more people who are running and it's a more saturated space, but also the algorithms have shifted. It is not the same. It's drastically different.
And organic growth has essentially been halted. 75% of your own followers will not see your content unless you pay for folks to see it. So these are folks who are your friends, your family, or have decided to follow an official page you do. They're actually not being served the thing they said that they wanted unless you pay to show it to them.
But even then, it's still not hitting the same numbers that it used to. I'm just trying to think of it. In 2016, we were posting things and the numbers that were being released were not accurate. That came out later that year, that the millions of people that were supposedly watching my videos were not millions. But I can tell you one thing, they weren't what they are now. They're not 75 people. And my Facebook page was growing. Every single time I go on the news, I would gain a couple thousand followers, for instance. Now it's been frozen for I don't know. I don't care. I don't even put energy into it. I'm sorry, guys, on Facebook for watching this, but I just, it's not.
No, it's been a fairly universal phenomenon that people have seen. Yeah, for sure. And when it comes back to the Italian elections, if you are a progressive working class candidate running for a city council seat, Italian elections are a little bit complicated. Like, you vote for the mayor and the kind of big ones, and then you have a preference vote where you write in somebody's name if you want them to win. If you don't do that, then the party, just whoever their top favorites are, win. So anyone who's interesting to you is usually someone you have to write in. So this is something that, you win with 600 votes, with 1,000 votes. And so that you count those votes and you count them on WhatsApp, right? These are my 20 people in this group. Has everybody gone to the poll yet? Let me mark off if you've done it. This is how it's done. And so, it was a really scary moment when it goes down. And so I was with everyone where you're like, yeah, screw Facebook, we'll just hang out on Twitter this afternoon. But at the same time, you're like,
no, there's it's much bigger than Facebook. It's Facebook Enterprises is a monopoly. Let's just play a little clip from this hearing because I want to get back to the regulation for a second because, too big to fail is often used and there's conversations about public utility, but let's play this clip because I think this kind of highlights the challenges that we face.
Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen on regulating misinformation and hateful content.
This past March, Mark Zuckerberg told Congress, quote, "Others claim that algorithms feed us content that makes us angry because it's good for business. But that's not accurate.
I believe that the division we see today is primarily the result of a political and media environment that drives Americans apart.
It's not Facebook, it's human nature, is what he's saying."
I have a lot of empathy for Mark. Right? Mark has been working on Facebook since he was 19 years old, maybe 18 years old. Imagine spending your entire life building a thing which people are saying is dangerous. I think, so Mark's statements are very important in that he's highlighting that we have always had conflict. But the thing that Facebook is doing is it used to be the ways that we would connect with each other, the ways we would learn about information about the world, was there was always a gatekeeper somewhere in between. Mark has never set out to make a hateful platform, but he has allowed choices to be made where the side effects of those choices are that hateful, polarizing content gets more distribution, more reach.
The company will tell you that it's taken down a lot of content. 31 million pieces of hate speech, 3,000 accounts that were spreading COVID misinformation. They put warnings on more than 190 million pieces of COVID information.
I think that's a fascinating trade-off thing. So they say they've taken down 30 million pieces of content. They say they've put warnings on 190 pieces of content. Earlier in this interview, we talked about the idea that they were only detecting 3 to 5% of hate speech, right? Let's imagine if they are already putting warnings on 190 million pieces of COVID content, if they're only catching 10%, or let's be generous, 20% of pieces of COVID content, that means there's 1 billion pieces of COVID content they missed. Think about that. That's crazy.
Let's pause it for a second.
2 billion pieces of content they missed.
Pause it for a second. So I just want to, shit. Can we hold that spot wherever that spot was on the back end? So keep in mind here, this is, I think this is and we'll get to this afterwards, but just while she's talking, keep in mind, audience, and I know you know this, Arun, it's not that there is 1 billion pieces of misinformation and disinformation, hateful content that was not caught and caught early. That's important too. Because how long does it stay up there before they catch it and take it down? It's that the whole idea of virality is that it's up there and then it grows. So even if you're just getting 20%, that billion, if it's going viral and it's incentivized with the algorithm to go viral, it could easily within a year, that type of content could go to 3 billion or 5 billion or whatever.
And let me just jump in on that and agree with you with a yes and rather than a no but. But yes, and we thank her for her service. It's never easy. I'm sure this was hard. Lots of friends disappointed. You're not on a team anymore. But she is still a creature of tech. And you can hear in the way, it's a mindset. It's an understanding of how the world works. And it's an incorrect one that's going to kill us all. So, even here sort of talking about the scale, and it's like, well, there used to be a gatekeeper. It's like, no, there was never a gatekeeper. Maybe there was never that. It was not industrialized. It was not at this scale, right? It's like, it used to be fine for people to cut trees down. Like, as many trees as real people could cut down was fine. It's when you get machines to do it in a mass way that it happens so fast that you can actually destroy more than can create itself. Like, this sort of scale matters, and how this stuff works at scale matters. And tech folks are looking for these scale solutions, right? What's the climate change solution going to be? You ask a tech person, it's going to be to drop particles in the air to reflect sunlight, because, we can just keep adding things to make the environment right. This is the sickness that infects all of it. And so the idea that, we just need Facebook, but with a better gatekeeper who can hit better percentages, misunderstands the scale of what they actually work in, and misunderstands, I think, sort of the sickness that's in Silicon Valley thinking.
And just, okay, well, let's keep playing the clip, and then we'll address some of Mark's.
Yeah, I got worked up. Sorry.
It's okay.
Think about
again. Thank her for her service.
2 billion pieces of content they missed, and that's the part of the conversation that Mark is not talking about, or Facebook is not talking about. Is right now we have no independent transparency mechanisms that allow us to see what Facebook is doing internally, and we have seen from things like the Community Enforcement Report that when Facebook is allowed to create its own homework, it picks metrics that are in its own benefit. And the consequences, they can say we get 94% of hate speech, and then their internal documents say we get 3 to 5% of hate speech. We can't govern that.
For Facebook's response.
Interesting.
Yeah, she nailed it there, though. Yeah. Which is, you can just dress up this pig any way you want when you have enough data, right?
Well, of course, you don't regulate yourself. I mean, this is one of the oldest tricks in government is take it to a committee, pick who goes in that committee so that they reflect your interests, and then come back with a report that's not that scathing against the thing that's being investigated.
And then blame the consumer. Somehow they're littering, exactly. They're doing this, they're doing that. Yeah,
it's not systemic.
They're just not recycling properly. You're like, why are you putting things in plastic? Stop that.
That's it. Just stop using straws. That'll save. I'm not saying that straws obviously kill wildlife. I'm not.
Straws. We just stepped in a big one there. Yeah.
I didn't mean to say
we don't need to fight about straws. Yeah.
No, but I do remember. As I know, I do remember when I ran for public advocate. I ran against a guy who was like the climate guy, and I was like, okay, he didn't understand anything about climate. He was like, why? I'm all for banning straws, and that's really going to help our environment. I'm like, I'm sorry. When I'm drinking my coffee underwater in New York, I'm really glad that this was made of avocado. That was his solution to climate change. And there were 17 candidates in New York City, the largest city in the country, and that was their solution for climate change. We're doing great, guys. All right, but this is the response from Mark Zuckerberg today. I'm just going to cut out a little bit. I'm reading it from
Robozuck. Here we go.
All right. This is just a chunk, but bear with me for a second.
Yeah, small chunk, because he's terrifying.
Oh my God. This is a very long statement, so it's about a paragraph and a half. Many of her claims, don't make any sense. If we wanted to ignore research, why would we create an industry-leading research program to understand these important issues in the first place? If we didn't care about fighting harmful content, then why would we employ so many more people dedicated to this than any other company in our space, even ones larger than us? Okay, it's not the battle between shitty companies here, by the way, guys. If we wanted to hide our results, why would we have established an industry-leading standard for transparency and reporting on what we're doing? And if social media were as responsible for polarizing society as some people claim, then why are we seeing polarization increase in the US while it stays flat or declines in many countries? Oh, because we'll get to that in a second. With just as heavy use of social media around the world, because they're not democracies. At the heart of these accusations is this idea that we prioritize profit over safety and well-being. That's just not true. For example, one move that has been called into question is when we introduced the meaningful capitals, meaningful social interactions change to our feed. The change showed fewer viral videos and more content from friends and family. That's what's dangerous, by the way, guys. That's the root of how this works. That's my editorialism. which we did knowing it would mean people spent less time on Facebook. But what research suggested is it was the right thing for people's well-being. Is that something a company's focus on profits over people would be doing? Okay, first off, cool. You don't like your profits? Go national. Let's like make you a public utility. I'm just saying, like, if that's not what then fine, you wouldn't be resisting.
No, but like keeping the patient alive so you can keep like getting money off it. Every parasite knows how to do that. He's like, I didn't kill the patient. You're like, great.
Yeah, cool. You know? But what kills me about this is, so this, you and I both understand this from a political standpoint, and to tie back to the 2016 elections in Cambridge Analytica, that is the heart of it. When you have people-to-people interactions, rather than a viral video from Now This telling you about XYZ, when it is actual human beings sharing misinformation, their beliefs, it is more trusted. It is politics 101. Human to human content is more effective than buying $1 billion in ads. And that's, I mean, the heart of it. So and this is really just like the conversation I wanted to have from the beginning, which is, and what you touched on with tech, is this is about humans. They have all the money in the world. They're doing all the research and hiring all these firms to tap into how humans think. But the one part that they seem to not understand is how hate is profitable, how hate and misogyny are intertwined. I'm saying misogyny because it is in the fascist playbook for a reason. There's a form of hate and misogyny that go together. They're not always, misogyny always has hate. Hate doesn't always have misogyny. I'll just say that. But these two things, which of course stems racism and science deny, and these are communities that all seem to overlap. But it's based on human interaction and human conversations that were not invented yesterday. This didn't start with Facebook. This is how fascists rise. This is, if you look at the communication of fascists from 100 years ago or 80 years ago, it's really interesting that there's a lot of similarities. It's scalable now, which is what you're saying. Why is that Facebook does not seem to want to address what is human psychology, basic human psychology that we all learn for the most part, who study politics, on how to influence people, and businesses learn. Coca-Cola got it.
I mean, it's really maddening to watch him go through sort of this long list of things that he thinks are helpful or has come with. And you're just like, all of these questions you're asking have really simple answers and you're not even addressing the right question. He's like, who could have known this would happen and that would happen? And it's sort of looking for answers in all the wrong places. And I think what has to happen here is probably an old-fashioned like media monopoly breakup is the best way. I think people are calling for the breakup. I'm not just saying this selfishly because we want those extra preference votes in the Italian elections, but breaking off WhatsApp, number would be a great start. But there are no sort of, I don't know how to say it except that he's sort of asking these questions in this way of like sort of astonishment and like, what can we do against like inevitable hate that rises up? And it's like the same thing people have always done because this isn't anything new. And you don't need to be so sort of aw shucks dazzled by it all. He's just not the man for this moment for his own company. If I was a shareholder of Facebook, I'd be like, do we really necessarily want this guy?
I think that's, within 1 year, I feel like that's where it's going to end up.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, except Peter Thiel is, don't forget, let's be real about who this company is. These are not your icons for democracy. I think the argument might, like, maybe somebody internally might want to leak this out if it comes out. The issues that they're facing is it's not that it's too big to fail. It's like the algorithm is so overwritten. Like, you can't, like, what are you going to do? Just scrap the algorithm and start over? Or, I mean, it's too complicated at this point. Like, how do you change the business model of a company? It's not even business model. It's what do? You just, it's built off of that, and it just keeps growing. And that's Very hard.
And this is probably one of, look, we're two people who don't know that much about tech, going deep into tech, and I'm going to take us into a place that we have no business being. But it's sort of like the real thing you worry about with AI is not like the machine comes alive in Terminator or whatever and comes after us. It's that it works like shit because we taught it and we're too lazy to fix it. Just because we don't feel like it. Not because it has armed guards and has become self-aware, because we just don't feel like dealing with it. And people are making money, so who cares? And then we're dead from climate change and it's all right.
We're already there. Arun, thanks for joining for this.
Let's bring the mood down. Let's bring it down sometimes,
It's okay. We'll just play a clip of, men responding to Rabb's bill.
Yes, just nothing but a vasectomy montage. Everyone enjoy.
Brad, can we work on that for next week? Just have a montage of responses. That would be great. Thanks. Okay. See you next week, Arun. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Thanks to everybody for joining the Nomiki Show this Wednesday. Make sure to check us out on Friday for Femme Friday. We have a great show. And of course, the committee program on Mondays here on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube at 3 p.m. and you can go check them out on their Patreon and other places, I believe Twitch as well. And of course, if you're not aware already, Rockfin, we have this special show that we're doing, TNS Live, on Tuesday nights on Rockfin at 8 p.m. It is usually, it's live. It's always live. We're going to be taking questions, so make sure to throw questions at me and I will answer them on air through Rockfin. You can send them to me wherever, the Nomiki Show at gmail.com. You can put them in this chat here, wherever you are, wherever you're listening or watching this show. But it is a special show. It's exclusive to Rockfin. We had Tom Hartman on this week. It was a really great show. I definitely recommend watching it. And we had Stephen Donziger on, who has now been prosecuted by the judge and sentenced to 6 months in prison. Yes, that is the capitalist judicial system that we live in. All right, everybody, stay in solidarity. We will see you on Friday.
The Nomiki Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.